So, welcome to this final part and final chapter of the entire tutorial series. And what I like to show you in the first place is not just the result that we try to achieve, a countryside image that has some trees and a road and so on. So, which hopefully looks nice for you. In this tutorial, I will build everything on the fly. So this is not a pre-built scene or something like that. So the image that you have seen right now is the result of this entire tutorial series. And every time when I dig around with those tools here in Houdini or in RenderMan, I will probably forward those processes a bit so that you don't need to see when I have painted maybe 20 minutes or so. This is just to skip the unnecessary parts from describing the entire workflow. So I also want to mention that I have rebuild some of these tools a little bit that I have presented in the previous asset tutorial presentation. So in the meantime, after recording those tutorials, I have added additional tools, something like a draw helper, which is something like where is it? Where is the button? It's just a cone, and you can place this cone on your map. You can draw it with the layout tool, and then you can use those new controllers that I have built. They are interconnected with those assets, and then you will be able to, you can place those markers on your map, and you will be able to draw your field road, your farm fence, and your power lines. And I also use this method a slightly different way to be able to draw squares or n-gons that get projected to the ground as a scatter base for points to be able to instance our high-res trees and plants and so on. I use this method just it's more optimized for our scene, for our data density. So the asset gallery itself, the asset painting with the layout tool can only be a small portion for adding details in some eye-catching areas, something like that, but not for the majority of assets. So the majority of trees has to be placed with this tool that I have built. So, and this is the cone itself. I baked it out to asset, and this is just a little helper. Nothing special. I created the point cloud for the trees right in here. You will see it when the time has come. And the first thing that we need to do, we need to block out our scene to have an overview, kind of like a blueprint in order to build our shot. And I will create two parts or maybe 3 parts of geometry for our shot, though the foreground where we place the majority of our assets. Then we will have a background portion, just a mesh underneath, so that we don't see the line between both meshes. We will not connect them physically, so we will just place them behind. So this gives also the option to move them. We will draw a little line of trees right in here, maybe with a road, so that we make sure that we don't see a transition line. And maybe some higher mountains in the back, but I'm not sure about that for now. So, and what you need to do is, first of all, you need to drop down a height field. I will save this as chapter 1 for now and resave it as the result of this chapter for starting with chapter 2. So I will overwrite that. And the next thing that I will do, or I have done, is not just changing those values right in here, but also adding some noise to this entire scene. I will move with the camera a little closer so that we get, that we get an overview and a feeling for how it will look when we are very close with the camera right in here, something like that. And I also started to paint out some of these details, so maybe we should add some little detail more here in the foreground. Maybe something like that. Just a little detail. So next thing that we do, so you can draw it like you want essentially, but for this tutorial you should maybe use this as a base. So of course when you want to paint the volume itself, you have to make sure that you switched to height, and default is mask, so this will not work. And next thing that we do is we drop down a height field, erode, and we'll go back to frame 1 and start the process. And we will not let this run for too long, just a little bit to get some detail in the ground. We will use those resulting point textures in our shading process, so just to have some variety in the textures and so on. So, and I will change some of these values. I will forward this playing with the values since it can take some time. So see you again in a couple of seconds for you. So I think I found some really interesting values for the simulation part, but what I have seen is we need to crank up the resolution quite a bit. So maybe we go down with the grid spacing to 1. This will provide more volume resolution as well as take a little longer to simulate. So, but in the end it should look not blocky, and I will only use it in the shading process. So what I will not do is I will not bake this out as a mesh, a texture mesh. I don't want to do that. So we'll crank up the resolution a bit further. So that we get more fine detail. Something like that. Next thing that we want to do, we will convert this to a geometry height field, and you will see it looks kind of different now. This is, as expected. So we will crank up the resolution as well. For here, we only need to have some variety, nothing special. We can deal with the shading in a later step. I will also blur the attribute, the color attribute that we get from here, and I will delete some of the attributes that we don't need. So what we don't need for this step is we don't need the base, the bedrock, the debris, the height, the mask, sediment, and water. We can use the rest. We don't need that. We don't need the name attribute for now. So that's all what we need. The converting Houdini height field convert or the convert height field will also generate some UV coordinates for you automatically. This is kind of nice. And the next thing is I will drop down attribute blur to blur the CD attribute a little bit so that we get a more realistic look and variety. So what we also do now is we use a color node and we will re-ramp CD. So from maybe first of all we should one step back. We should make it gray, a gray. We should use a gray ramp first. Ramp from attribute CD. Is this working? It doesn't look though. Why is it still brown? What we can do is we can drop down a VOP, a point VOP. And we will use luminance and use the CD value and bring it float to vector. Float to vector, and I will drop down the luminance into CD again. Now we have a gray map, and then we can use a color to reshade everything with a ramp. So CD. Maybe we use the same color in the beginning. Interesting. Of course, what we also should do is we should stash this result right in here. So we will store this result in the process. This was frame 92. We go back to our erosion and make sure that next time when we try to rebake it, we use this value at freeze 90. So, and now it has worked. So sometimes the viewport is not updating. So European soil is not so yellowish orange. It's more dark gray with a little bit of brown. I will add a much slighter version so that we get some variety, something like that. I think this looks cool. So we will place an out, and this is our first blocking mesh, something like that. I will copy and paste this. I will also merge it. And now we make sure that we don't have the same naming. So this is our foreground plane. We call it, maybe we should rename it, and we should also save the file so far. And I will call this foreground plane concept. And this is not the foreground, this is mid-range plane concept. So we will use the same name. That's why we use the $OS. So, and what we will do now is we will go back to an earlier stage, something like that. We have activated the ghost other object so that we see what we do. And we will move this something like here, make it a little bit larger. We don't need to have so much detail, so we will crank up the grid space again. Maybe we add more of our noise. So, and now we will look through how it might look. Not enough, so okay. Next, what we do is we paint a new height field paint, something like that. Here I crank up the radius, maybe too large. I will go up with the grid spacing so that we paint a little better. So I think I have found a good way of dealing with this. And I cranked up the height field noise. And I will delete the other attributes same way like in the old one. So it looks blocky now. This is not a problem. So we will of course do the same right in here. So and we will stash the result. Sometimes the viewport is not nice to me, but yeah. So then we have a little variety in the shape itself. And what we now will do, since this is all geometry, we will drop down a smooth, so an attribute blur. And what we blur is P. And as you can see, it's just a polygon operation. And it's totally okay, and it's fine. Later it will cover it with a lot of grass. But this gives us an option to have some variety in the background. So next thing what we do is we will deform this plane. I will pick a point right in here. We'll move it up, and we are in point mode. And I will increase the deformation radius. So this is a nice and handy way to be able to deform this plane a little bit. Maybe this was too harsh, something like that. So once again, I will look through the entire mesh, and now we see it's a little too high. So this is not what we like to have. So now the viewport is working again. As you can see, we go back in our edit. Now it's gone, and we'll move it down. We move those edges in front down. You can do it like you want. So those have to stay below our plane or front plane, something like that. This looks probably cool. So here we have in the background something like we don't like to have. We go back, something like, maybe change those values. You can play with them, with those points. Maybe we should mirror this result. So I want to have this big hill on the completely other side. So something like that. We go back. Yeah, this looks much better. And I will move it as well as more right here on the left. You will probably ask yourself why I don't move the subcreate to the right. So with this handle, I do this just because to not compromise our scattering process later on. So when you will move the handles in the layout yourself, you will run into the issue that our point cloud that we will scatter on those hills and on the ground, that this will not work anymore. So I think this is the right way to go. So, and what we also will do, we will copy paste this right here, and we give it a new name. So this is mid-range plane 2 concept, and I will move it more to the left, and I will also change the shape a little more. So with a bigger value. So here, and maybe something like that. Some smaller hills on the left. So, yeah, okay. More to the left. And maybe we should not mirror it this time. Or at least not in this axis. We will mirror it in the z-axis. So, yeah, better. We look back. Yeah, this looks kind of nice. So when we place our camera right here, something like that, we should move this one more to the left. So a lot more to the left. Yeah, this looks much better. So we have a path directly through the scene. And we will do this a little more flat. Just, yeah. So maybe 500 this time. Better. Probably a lot better. So we will move it to the right a little more. So something like that. So yeah, I think this looks cool. Camera will be low. We will have some assets right here. The majority will be covered by the trees and so on. So I think this is a really good. Yeah, I think this looks great. So next thing that we want to do is we will place a camera. No, not this way. We will add it right here so that the camera is the same. So this is camera layout. I will look through it, and here we can move the camera a little bit further. So our camera has a height of 13 meters, and it already looks really great. 11 meters. Yeah, I think this can work quite nicely. Maybe we can move it a little more into that direction. So everything looks cool from the placement, and now I essentially pre-place our windmill. Yeah, maybe here on the right, and I will move everything to the left right in here, something like that. We will make a network box. So call this, yeah, terrain, something like that. And we will not bake out the asset, and we will also not use the placement for that. This has the disadvantage that we cannot have different blades, blade rotation positions that we already have in the animation, as you can see. So this will not work with the asset placement itself, I guess. I never did that, honestly. So we will go the traditional way of doing it without the layout painting. And for that, I will go back to my camera, and I will drop down a transform. So we first of all need to check the position by hand where we can place it. Maybe we rotate it a little bit, so not the X and Z value rotation, only the Y axis. So we could place our first one right in here in the background, something like that. Looks great. And I will copy it, and it will not work if you see in a couple of seconds, so you will not see the second one. But this is not a problem. We will bring it much further in the foreground, and we will do the same thing right again, and we will place it something like here. And we will check in a couple of seconds if this is working. So, and how it will look, of course. So what we now have to do, we cut those connections. We have our 3 positions, and we will bake them out as a USD cache. So I have created a caches chapter folder, so you will have all caches for all the stages in the tutorial, for all for each chapter file, right in the correct caches folder for each chapter. So we are currently in cache 1, and the result of this will be stored to chapter 2, of course. So this is our chapter 2 is the starting base for the next chapter. So we are currently in chapter 1, and here I will place the windmill 01 USD. And we have to make sure that we have no reference anymore. So we will bake it out completely and flatten the stage. So we will go back here. We will rotate the blades a little bit by moving the animation frame, cache it out. We'll copy and paste this. Move the animation a little bit further, go to the next one, cache it to windmill 2, save, move it to the next one, a little more, something like that. And this is our third windmill, save it. So now we need a reference lob. This has the advantage that we can define a new destination primitive path and call this windmill 1, since we have to make sure that each windmill has its own primitive path, otherwise it will not work. We will merge them together, something like that. So tutorial is still recording, I double checked. And now we have to load our windmill USD files, and as you can see, they are really large. So this is the entire mesh. This is the entire flattened stage without any reference. And this is something we want to have. And now we have our 3 windmills. And now we check if the distance is big enough so that they will not touch each other, and it looks great. So they are not able to touch. Maybe we should move this one a little further in the back, something like that. Of course, we need to rebake it, and then we have to reload it, and here we have it. So there's no animation anymore. We go back to frame 1 and link it into our shot. Check if everything is placed on the ground. So, and this looks great. Something like that. So, what we can do, I don't like that this hill is so small, because we want to place some trees here in the foreground, and we don't, the trees would cover this entire area. So we go back to this mesh, which is here on the left. Maybe we should move it more logical. So this is the right, this is the foreground. This makes more sense. I will drop down a new transform. And this transform, I will use my preset, which is essentially just an expression centroid on these axes, so that our manipulator is in the middle of our mesh. I will also deactivate this preview, material preview, and I will do that. So this looks much better. We see the UVs, we don't want that. So something like that. We will move it a little more in the background and probably scale it a little, something like that, and a little more in height. Of course, we need to check that. And I don't really like the result, so maybe a little up. Yeah, I think this looks much better. Even when we have this problem, this is something we should resolve just in case. So when the camera is close to here, those lines should be underneath. So we will drag down a new edit and go to point mode. Select one of these points in the foreground. This will not work because of the lock. So I deactivated the lock. Something like that. And again, we will crank up the radius, something like to 100. Maybe 300. Something like that. As well as here and there. just to make sure that we don't see the transition. We don't need to connect them physically. We will go back and move them a little more to this one, this position, something like that, so that we have no direct contact between those islands or those patches. So this is maybe a very small detail, but can make a difference. And maybe we can move it a little up more. So what we do now is we copy those translations. We go back into our mesh right in here. I have dropped down a new transform and I copy and paste those values right in here. And all what we have to do now is we have to, go back to 0, and now it is exactly as it was before. So we move the translation from this stage to sub-level. So I will save once again, and just in case it will crash, I will create a stage 1 of chapter 2. This will probably help in order something has crashed, or I did a mistake and need to start from this stage. So I will call this 1 and save it once again. So we are in chapter 2.1. This is maybe even better. So we have pre-placed those windmills. We will move everything a little down in this network box to have some more space and connect without those lines to have a little more structure in our network. Escape. We don't want to edit those. I will move them right here. We don't need them yet. Also, this is something we don't need yet. So, yeah, the next thing that we have to do is we need to block out some of our tree lines just to have a feeling for the scene itself. So what I do now is I will take the ruler and we'll copy the ruler and we'll recall the ruler to something like forest 1. And maybe it's in the back or on the left. We will start with the left side. So we go into this box or into this ruler. It's just the box. Hide everything. So, and when we remember correctly, the majority height of our trees is around 40 meters. So between 40 and 50 meters. So I will size up this box to 40 meters. We'll copy and paste the size and put it to the center and divide it by 2 so that it will stay exactly on the ground. So this is the average size of our trees. And of course, it's only a dummy representation. I will give it some scale, 20 meters by 20 meters. Oh no, that was the center, 20 meters by 20 meters, just to have a box. And we will not use this box for rendering, but for placement and for blocking out our shot. We could even provide a color, something like that. Maybe a darker one to get some feeling for the color too. So this is our first forest, and I will place it right in here, something like here, something like that. We'll scale it up, maybe not so large. 2, 5. the most important thing is that we will not place any assets that we don't see in the camera. And because of that, blocking out the shot before we even drag down or draw down our geometry or our trees, this is really handy to also save some performance and not need to move around and need to find a good spot and so on. So when the blocking is not working, the final thing will also not working. So always try to block with simple objects just to get a feeling of composition. I highly recommend the composition tutorial from Andrew Price, aka Blender Guru, because his composition tutorial is essentially the essence of learning how to block out your shot before you even start with working. So you have to think about the placements and scale and so on. And if this is not working, it will not work in the final product. And all the work that you've done is wasted. So, and the first thing that we see is that our hill is too small. And this could be because our camera height, so we are currently in the height of 11 meters. I will move it more to the left side. Oh, yeah, of course we should move the camera lock on. And here we have this riverbed, and maybe we can use this riverbed as our street position later on. So I will move this much more here. Here we have a line of trees, a hill in the back. Maybe we should move the hill more to the right side. This looks really nice. So our lines in the shot are going to the center, into the future, into the background. So this is also directly, so when you follow this line, it will move into the image center. And in the image center or at the point where those lines, those image lines should hit, should be our eye-catching machine. So this right side is very heavy. Here you have these tall machines. So the image is something like gravitating towards the right, and this is something we have to compensate on the left so that our feeling is balanced. So of course we will do something like that. Maybe we should turn the camera a little bit more. When we would have a field here in the foreground, maybe this could be nice. And maybe we should think about, having those trees only right here, and the machine here on the left. So I will move this box a little more to this hill right in here. Maybe we should also use some smaller trees. Yeah, I think this could work a lot more. But for a field, 4 meters in translation now, in the height, 4 meters. No, that's the box. So the camera is now in 8 meters height. Maybe we should stick to 3 meters, or 4 meters is maybe way better. So what I will do, I will go back, I will deactivate the forest on the left and will save it as the next step. So right in here, next step. I probably should rename them Build Layout Chapter 1 and so on. Maybe we should do this right now. This makes more sense. So this is stage 2. We go to our files right here. and this is the one we are working currently. This is our starting, and this is our result. So this should be this one. This should be deleted, and this is our result. So that's the file we are currently working in. So chapter 1, 2. Nice. Resolve that. So what I will do now is I will change our foreground a little more. I will make it more flat, otherwise it will probably not work. Maybe this was a little too big. Yeah, plugging out the shot is really, really important. So we will go back into our foreground and save this as stage 3. So we are currently working stage 3. So go back in here. Here we have our environment in the foreground. And what I will do now is, we have some variety right here. I will as well use a polydeform to move this area a little more to the left to have more space. 300. I think this will help us a lot. So I will forward this process of finding the right shapes a little bit. So I forwarded this by 400%, and I moved the hill on the left a little more in the foreground and to the side to have more space for the machine that we will place later on. And I also started to shape out the background hills a little bit more. So yeah, I have added more copies of it and changed the shapes and so on to have a little more space. The nice advantage by using hills is that we can create more depth in this entire scenery, since we can tint each hill a little more into the blue color, or we can use a Z depth pass in Z buffer in compositing to change the coloring a little bit more, add some blue in compositing and some or atmospheric fog to have more, to create the illusion of distance. And and this is what I basically did here. So I will come now back into normal speed in a couple of seconds. Okay, so I will save this as stage 4. Will be interesting how much files we will get in the meantime. So just in case to not doing something wrong. So I will reorganize this woods right in here. So we will look at it once again. And I remember that we also have to create new UV coordinates. Since we have deformed this ground plane, we have to reset the UVs once again. And this could be done right in here. So we have deformed this And I will drop down UV texture. And since we have not changed the shape geometry, we have still our rectangular, we should have correct UVs. So as you can see, it has a deformation right now, right in here, but it's reprojected and it's working. So that's what we want. So yeah, I think I will place now some of those forests just for testing, blocking out our shot. So this is something that I also started to forward by 400%. I just placed some of those dummy objects to shape out some positions or to find out some positions for tree lines. A small tree line where you have only a few trees nearby, more in a line or something in the background or in front of those wind generators, energy generators. And yeah, I tried to find the right and correct spacing so that everything looks nice in composition. And I also thought about using a box to represent the sprayer, the field machine, robot field machine. So I choose the different color for it and try to find a good position for it, also in regards of the composition itself. And yeah, this is what we see at the moment. What I did here, also some trees on the hills in the distance. And now I come back and to real time. Yeah. Yeah, something like that. So we have some trees there. This will be heavy. And here we have a field. There's a field. Here we have probably, yeah, maybe a little hill with grass. So this could be covered with grass as well as that. And here's our field in the foreground. And maybe this one should be a little larger, more in the foreground. Yeah, maybe this is much better. Something like that, and the field here, of course. So this is our basic blocking. I will save this file now to chapter 2. And in chapter 2, we will populate this scene with the street and so on. We have a basic placement right now, and the rest will come on the fly. So see you in the next session.